Welcome, NutritionRadio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry, a university nutrition professor of over 20 years and podcast host of long-running shows like Iron Radio. Come on in. Market news from the food world. Hey, everybody. Well, after working in the food and supplement industry throughout my career, I can tell you there have been some advances in dietary fiber. As we noted last week in our chat on weight loss programs, there are many types and uses for the dozens of kinds of fibers, but consumers often just stop at the label, right, at the dose per serving. So let's analyze and comment on a new article from the Institute of Food Technologists. Before we dive in, let me tell you, I wish I had a quarter for each time I had to explain that as a nutritionist, I'm concerned with what happens after you swallow something. I'm not necessarily a culinary expert or a food chemist, food scientist. Those guys may be more concerned with product development, right? The physical characteristics of a product, like what fiber brings to a product's consistency or its taste or its mouthfeel and the like. In any case, in this article by Wing Fu Lai in the April 2023 Food Technology magazine, that topic got attention. In fact, it starts off with something that I just said. Consumers have been increasingly knowledgeable about the health benefits of fiber, but it's still common for consumers to stop there, right? To just take a general look and simply see whether a food product is rich in fiber. Does it have 2, 3, 4, or 5 grams of fiber per serving, for example, rather than to examine the actual type of fiber that's in that food. And again, there are so many, and they have very different properties. If you tuned in last week for the episode on weight management and fiber, you know that the daily value for fiber is 28 grams. 28 grams per day is what you should inch toward as you eat different meals throughout the day. So 10% of that would be a good source, 2.8 grams of fiber. So you want a food that's a good source of fiber, 2.8 grams. Excellent source would be double that, about 20% of the daily value, 5.6 grams of fiber. You can see if you're going to get toward a 28-gram target, or by the World Health Organization standards, even a little bit more, then you're probably going to have to get about 5 grams of fiber or so, or even maybe 10 per meal. Now, obviously, that's going to depend on the number of meals and snacks you have and that sort of thing. But it does kind of give you a ballpark of what you should be consuming when you sit down to eat. But that's dose, as we mentioned, and that's where a lot of people stop. But if you want to get the benefits of fibers, all these different ones, they differ by the fiber type. Globally, though, they keep your digestive system healthy. They can help lower blood cholesterol concentrations. We mentioned last time help with weight management because they're kind of filling and satisfying, some more than others. I read that hydrolyzed guar gum may be the best one, although you do have to be sort of careful with guar for reasons we talked about last week. But very interesting stuff as far as satiety. In fact, some of the literature goes back and forth on the satiety, the fullness and satisfaction that you get from a meal when it comes to dietary fiber because the types differ in how potent they are in that regard. But turning back to this article, using dietary fiber in food product development, a definition is called for early on, and this is going to really validate what we talked about last week. According to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, Nutrition Facts Label's final rule, dietary fiber is defined as, quote, non-digestible, soluble, and insoluble carbs with 3 or more units, right, monomeric units, little links in the chain, if you will, and lignin that are intrinsic and intact in plants or isolated or synthetic. And all of these are non-digestible. And this is definitely one of those cases where synthetic is not bad and natural is not necessarily good. Some of the synthetic or isolated non-digestible carbs, again, these chemical units, you don't have the enzymes in your digestive tract to break them apart like regular, starches, for example. I'm not going to bore you about the kinds of bonds involved here, but some of them include beta-glucan, for example, from oat. There's also a yeast beta-glucan, which I've actually bought in the past as an immune enhancer. Taken at the right dose actually might help with immune activity. So very interesting stuff because there's a lot of stuff on the market that I think gets overblown for immunity. Just simple vitamin C preparations and that kind of thing. Not that vitamin C wouldn't help on some level. Anyway, beta-glucan, psyllium husk, guar gum, pectin, you've probably heard of pectin before, locust bean gum, alginate, alginates something interesting, and we may talk about later on the show here. Inulin. Inulin is one that I personally have seen the most, and I actually buy those Fiber One bars, the little coffee cakes, the brownies. They have inulin in them. Inulin feeds the right bacteria. It's a prebiotic, right, in your lower intestines. I like that, but in the very act of feeding those bacteria a fermentable fiber like this, like inulin, you could end up with a certain amount of gas or bloating and that kind of thing. So I just eat like half of one in the morning and half of one later. If you can tolerate a whole one, fantastic. Go ahead and go for that. But that erythritol or sorbitol, oftentimes you see that OL on the end of some of these listings in the carbohydrate section. Those are sugar alcohols, and those are likely also playing a role in some of my limited ability to deal with those things. Of course, chicory root fiber is like the number one ingredient. So 6 grams of fiber in a little brownie or a little coffee cake, that's a fair amount to add to your breakfast, for example. Back to the article here. It says dietary fiber plays a role in promoting gut health. I think we know that. We've covered that. By affecting fecal formation and the composition of gut microbiota. Again, which of those many, many species of bacteria are getting fed something like might be fermentable or have some other interaction with those bugs? It says various physiochemical properties. We've talked about this in the past as well. Solubility, the viscosity, right? The thickness, resistance to flow, the fermentability. Dietary fibers useful for a lot of things, including cardiovascular disease. The soluble ones in particular tend to form a gel. They can bind with cholesterol that's present in your gut, in your GI tract. These bile substances coming from your liver bind with those, and so you pass them and shed them and relieve yourself of some of that cholesterol burden. It's not going to have an effect like a statin drug. It's not that powerful, but it will have a benefit there. As far as direct food product applications, it says fortification for a wide range of food groups ranging from meats to bakery products. We were just talking about a bakery product. Low-fat chicken meatballs, for example, have been fortified with dietary fiber, including pearl millet flour, wheat flour, grape pomace powder, pomegranate pomace powder, carrot pomace powder, and beetroot pomace powder. And that's according to Santhi et al. 2020. And just to give you the high-level Wikipedia version of pomace, if you're wondering, pomace, the solid remains of grapes, olives, or other fruit after pressing for juice or oil. Contains the skins, pulp, seeds, and stems of the fruit. To me, this is not unlike how they use spent coffee grounds. You extract what you want from it, and what's left can be upcycled into something useful. And by the way, the fibers that are in hydrolyzed spent coffee grounds, so sort of pre-digested in a sense. That sounds kind of gross. So enzymatically treated spent coffee grounds. You don't want to be crunching on these, spent coffee granules kind of thing. But they have prebiotic activity. Very cool stuff, this whole upcycling idea. I love it. So to just sort of wrap up here, the article ends by proposing implementing regulatory measures that require clear and more detailed labels on food packages to sort of clarify the type of dietary fiber that's there. I think this is going to call for a lot of consumer education, but that's why we're talking about this here. If you have any questions about dietary fiber, you can leave a comment on our YouTube backup, Lawnman07, again on YouTube. And also, while I'm at it, please consider leaving a review on iTunes. It really helps a lot. We have a couple of reviews now in place. If you actually write something out, that's your chance to type something out and help guide the direction of the show in these early episodes. But that's all we're going to have for today. We'll see you next time. The NutritionRadio.org podcast is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, check with your physician, nutritionist, or qualified exercise physiologist in order to make the progress that you need.